is a college counselor and education consultant with over 13 years of experience. She has guided hundreds of students worldwide through complex processes of applying to undergraduate, graduate, and fellowship programs. Aizhan has also served as a consultant and trainer for prominent organizations such as UNICEF, United Nations Women, and private educational institutions across Kazakhstan, UAE, and Europe. Aizhan specializes in helping students develop and design impactful research projects. Her mentees have earned accolades for their research, presented at international conferences, published in academic journals, and secured admission at top research programs in the United States. So I'll give the floor to our amazing speakers. We prepared some questions, but also feel free to drop your questions in the Zoom chat as well. Yes, so I have a couple of questions. So my first question would be, so what made you interested in starting doing research in undergrad? Even though it's not a requirement, you have your classes, you have extracurricular activities, but what made you interested in starting research so early before even starting PhD? I'll start with Azamat.
For joining. So I started my research, I would say, way during my foundation year, like in Nazarbayev University. So I started it because I was bored, because like in foundation year, you have like a lot of time. So I was really bored. I started to read books. Okay, so but I wanted to do something. I went to gym. Okay, but I wanted to do something else. So I started to write to professors. Like I wrote to professors like in chemical engineering and chemistry because at that time I was not sure where to go. So two professors replied, one in chemical engineering and one in chemistry. I went to them, had some like a little bit interview and like knowing about the research more. And I chose the professor in chemistry department and I worked in his lab for 5 years. So I think the early starting was boring, but after that, I was really like starting to love science. Like when you are like in chemistry, especially when you're starting to creating something by your hands, it's really and you was like making characterization and your compound is really pure and you can do with this compound like use them in some applications. In my case, it was like some catalysis, doing some new molecules. So when you're seeing these results, and you're like, and you are the first that did that, and you're like, okay, this one can be sometime like after maybe 50 years that can be in the book, and you are like, okay, I'm going to continue. So I think first one was because I was bored, because I got a lot of time, and second one because like science is really interesting.
How about you, Adina?
Well, my experience is quite similar to Azamat's one. During my undergraduate, I wasn't sure if I want to apply for industry job right after my graduation, or I should stay in science and pursue PhD. So I started to also like sending an emails to faculty members in my department and ask them if I can join. So I started during my freshman year as well. And the studies at KAPNA wasn't as difficult, so I was worried basically too. And then I joined one lab. I didn't like it, the research, and I was trying to find the best lab which suit for me, and I liked the research. And then I wanted to expand my research experience, and I was looking for some internships abroad. And I applied for a few internship programs, and I got the nice scholarship. So they paid my scholarship for 2 months in South Korea. And then I applied. I also applied for Shahmardan Yesenov Foundation scholarship, and I was able to also had a really nice research experience in Carnegie Mellon University. And probably I decided to stay in science after my summer internship in South Korea, because I really like it, how science works, and I was first introduced with polymer chemistry and macromolecule study in South Korea. So I was really fascinated about like synthesis and how those like molecules can affect the human lives in the future. So yeah, that's how I basically came to this field and why I started to do a PhD. And also I knew that anyways, like both industry or the PhD, that having some solid research experience would boost my application. So that was also one of my motivation why I started to do research during the undergrad.
Mm. And Aizhan, when you talk to some potential applicants or who are interested in studying abroad in special graduate studies, how do you explain them or motivate them that doing some early research is of advantages for application?
Okay, so I mostly work with students who are applying for master's and undergraduate programs. And I don't really motivate anyone to do research because I feel like passion for research has to come intrinsically. I just explain to them that research is not just doing literature review, because a lot of times when you're working with someone who is coming out of an undergraduate program or who's coming out of high school, they're like, oh, research is easy. You just read a bunch of articles and then you paraphrase them and boom, that's your research. And you explain to them that research is a lot more complex than that. There's qualitative research, there's quantitative research. Your surveys do not just have to be the Google surveys that you send out to all of your friends. It's a lot more complicated, that there's a whole process to data collection, data cleaning, data interpretation. And that's when you start explaining that, they're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And that's when they really get into it. The way that I explain the importance of research to high school students and those who are getting into graduate programs are different, and they have different motivations. And those of you who have studied in US probably will know what the motivation is for graduate students. So for graduate students, it's the availability of funding, because most of the research-based graduate programs are well-funded, because scholars don't really make a lot of money. So you will find more scholarships, more institutional funding for PhD and master's level programs. But when it comes to professional degrees, like law degrees, business degrees, there is no such thing as polny grant. When people come up to me and I'm like, if you want to do research and you want to dedicate your life to creating new body of knowledge, that should obviously be supported, incentivized, because scholars don't really get paid a lot, unfortunately. When it comes to high school students who are applying into undergraduate programs, I explain to them that what makes these universities that they're applying to and that give out funding is that they are first and foremost research institutions, and I explain them the difference between liberal arts college, and a large institution where you have doctoral programs and postdoc researchers working there, and how that will supplement and complement their educational undergraduate level. So when you start explaining them all of those things, and that research is not just something that you do at a school library with your laptop and Wi-Fi, and you tell them, like you can actually travel to South Asia or Kenya or Europe and talk to people and transcribe interviews, and it can be a very action-driven process. They get really excited about it, and you don't really have to motivate them because they develop that intrinsic motivation and do the research. Because it's important, to do research not just for the sake of doing research, because academia is toxic in and of itself. Publish or perish. I don't like that. I think the body of research that we should be working on and publishing has to be something that can be applied to the real world, so that the funding is not wasted. And that's what I try to relay to applicants and young people that I work with.
Yeah, very good answers. And how do you find these resources? Like, I know that Azamat and Adina mentioned that they just approached their professors in undergrad, but then how did you find this international internships? And even if you found the internship, you secured your scholarship, then how do you find the labs in the US or in Korea? what resources did you use? What tips do you have?
Azamat, do you want to start or should I go?
Yeah, you can go. I can continue. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm going to just talk, to people who are connecting and they're thinking of, applying to undergraduate or graduate programs. So how do you find a research group? So if you are applying on to a US institution, first of all, all of it is on the website. If you can't find it on the website, you can just email the admissions committee or any current student. You can find a current student through LinkedIn, or you can find them through Instagram or TikTok. It's very easy to connect with people these days, and just ask them, hey, what kind of undergraduate research opportunities are available on campus? Obviously, you should ask a person whose profile displays research experience, because if you're going to message an athlete, and they're gonna be like, I have no idea. So it's very rare to see a university that doesn't show off its research facilities on their website. So if you can't find it on their website, obviously email them. And if they're not responding, then maybe you shouldn't apply to that university because they're not very responsive. But that being said, if we're talking about US, right, because we're all US-based people, in US at top 300 universities, pretty much all of them have some form of undergraduate research. So the first thing that you do is you can either apply to be a research assistant or an administrative assistant to a professor's research project. You can either do that through an internal platform that universities have. So different schools use different platforms. Usually you just, put in like an internship or a volunteer position that you want to be matched with. And then they have the professor's name, the kind of a student that they're looking for. They list jobs and responsibilities that you're supposed to do. And sometimes they even pay you. So depending on what is it that you want to do, you can apply for that position. Or if you are at that institution, you can just knock on their door or shoot them an email and be like, hey, I think I would be a great candidate. So that's a more formal way of going about it. The other thing is when, let's say, you are not really interested in any of the research that your professors are doing and you have your own research idea that you want to explore, but you need funding for it, right? Let's say you are in US and you want to, let's say you're at Penn State, right? University Park, but the issue that you want to be exploring is somewhere based in California, and you need funding, right? To go there, to fly there, to stay at a hotel, pay for your food and whatnot. Almost every research university has some form of funding for research projects. Some of the funding opportunities are very generous, so as in thousands of dollars, and some are very limited, because sometimes you don't have to travel that far. You can just, hop in a bus and go to a neighboring state for 2 to 3 days. And you formally apply for those research opportunities. You can apply every year. And one of the best ways to go about it is to talk to someone who has won that fellowship the year before, or talk to professors who are going to be selecting you, so that you can, prepare an application that meets all of the, or exceeds all of the expectations of that committee. And the third thing that you can do is obviously apply for research internships or fellowships outside of your university. You can do that through different platforms, or as you will find out when you're going to come to US, you should do it through networking. So if you have a professor who you're in a good relationship with, you approach them and you're like, hey, I have this idea. I want this research opportunity. Is there someone that you can connect me with? Because cold emailing works, but it takes up a lot of time because you have to send out dozens, sometimes hundreds of emails to get, 2 or 3 responses back. But then when it's an e-introduction and they know that you're a serious candidate and the person who's vouching for you is a university professor, getting opportunities is a lot faster. So that's how I usually advise students to approach finding a research project to work on or to get it funded.
So yeah, I think it's if you're having your bachelor's degree in the US, it's much more easier to find these research opportunities compared to if you're a student in Kazakhstan and trying to find these opportunities in the US. So how did you find your labs? Adina, you went to Carnegie Mellon, and Azamat went to Ohio.
Yeah, I can briefly talk about the US, and Azamat can continue because our experience is quite similar. So first of all, I applied for a scholarship program, and I won that scholarship program from Shahmardani Siena Foundation. And once I won, I started to looking for a lab. And first thing, you should determine in which field you want to work on. And once you determine in what kind of field or subtopic you want to work on, then you start searching for labs. And I used education Times Higher Education ranking system. So that ranking system showed me top universities in chemistry, for example. And I picked 20 top universities, and then I went to their website and was looking for the faculty members whose research experience or whose research interests match with mine. And then I started to shaping my email about like how that I have funding and I want to apply to the lab as an intern. So the email part is really important because professors are really busy and they don't have time to read the really long emails. So your email should be very structured and informative and not as long. So you should give a brief introduction about your background, like what kind of your research you done in during your bachelor, in your undergraduate, and mention that it's really important to mention that you have funding because most of the US professors, they don't want to fund like summer intern from abroad, especially if it's not the US. And second one is explain why you want to work on particular project on professor's lab and attach your CV to the email. And also the subject of the email should be really bright. Like for instance, I used self-funded summer intern. That's really informative, shows that I have funding and I want to do summer internship in the lab. So yeah, that's kind of, and Google Scholar also is a great source to find labs. So you can find papers on the field you are interested in, and then find the labs that works on that field and go to their website. And yeah, that's how basically you can approach this and find labs.
I totally agree with Adina and Aizhan, especially like with Adina's like case, like when you're writing self-funded, professor for sure will read this email because like the main issue is funding. Like everyone wants like someone in the lab that will work for free. Like it's nice. So I just want to add my experience. So finding professor or any resources in the university is kind of easier because like you kind of lock it in some place, but finding other international experience is way harder, especially with funding. For example, in my first and second year, especially after the COVID, I started to email, I don't know, 50 or more professors, just like about internship. I wrote first self-funded, and then we had the interview, and I just mentioned that I do not have enough money, so and that etc. stuff. And I was accepted to one of the internship program in the Canada, and professor agreed to fund. But at that time, I also won the Yessengazin Foundation. So when you have your own funding, now you can choose. So I started to write to everyone, especially like top 10, top 20 universities in US. So I also had the problem with Canada visa at the time because of Russian and Ukraine situation. So it was nice that I found another program. So I went to Ohio State University by like Yessengazin Foundation. Thank you for the funding and the opportunities giving to students. And about my second internship in Okinawa, it was like kind of interesting case because like I applied to this program 3 times, and I was rejected on the first one. Second, I was like, it was COVID time and they just canceled the program. And third, I was accepted and I did my like internship there like this year, starting from December till like March. So how I was accepted during my undergraduate time, my most of friends, like most of my friends was like programmers, like computer science majors. So computer science majors, they applying, I know, at least like 200 like companies for internship. So I just took their like how they're doing that. I just applied everywhere. Like it was like doesn't matter for me like if my CV like is like how to say, like if this research is like in catalysis or other field, I just applied everywhere. And like by that, I won some fellowship. I think it's called Conrad. And this really good scholarship, I even didn't know about that. It's mostly this scholarship is given for, social and humanities majors. But I don't know how I won that. But I tried to also connect my experience, like teaching chemistry with the social sciences, and I won that. So my advice, find as much as possible opportunities and do not be afraid to apply, because like it's easy to get rejected if you don't apply, but like when you will apply, at least you will have like 50% chance, and after that you will figure out, at least you will have like some offers so you can choose, so you will be in better position in that case.
And how did it help you, like, since you had this experience in your undergrad, how did it help you to get into PhD? Or if this question should to Aizhan, how having this research experience helps in applying to master's or PhD in the future?
We're talking about US, right? Because I'm trying to be specific.
Mostly US, but it can be also other institutions around the world.
Okay, I'm going to focus on US specifically because otherwise it's going to get a little too much, because I'm talking both to high school students who are joining us today, as well as those who are applying to graduate programs. The question is, how do you use research experience when you're applying to undergraduate and graduate programs, right? So the first thing, when you're applying to undergraduate programs, you don't really need to have research experience. If you have it, that would be great. You have to take into consideration that the admissions committees to undergraduate programs, they understand that different schools have different opportunities, and they will not hold it against you if your school does not have a research curriculum. They just look at students who maybe tried to pursue research independently. Fortunately, we have access to platforms like Coursera, like edX. You can always reach out to a university professor at your local university, or to a PhD student. Nazarbayev University students, for instance, are very open to collaborating with high school students. So that's when it comes to undergraduate programs. When it comes to master's and PhD, that's a bit different. So in US, when you are applying to more hard science programs, and I think Adina and Azamat are going to expand on this more, since they are doing hard science PhD programs. When you're doing hard science, there is a great value to having research, especially lab experience, because it's kind of weird if, okay, it's not weird, I don't want to say weird, but it is unusual, for someone without any experience applying to a biomedical or biochemical engineering PhD program, and they're like, I don't have any experience in this, like I just watched a movie or I read a book that inspired me. Chances are that application is not going to be successful, because you do need a lot of prior hard skills and knowledge in order to succeed in that field. But when it comes to social sciences, we're talking about education, political science, international relations, sociology, psychology, and so forth. People usually get surprised when I tell them that you don't really need to have formal research experience when applying to PhD programs in US. The other thing, I think somebody asked in the chat, in US, when you're applying to PhD programs, you do not need to get a master's degree, because you get your master's degree while you're getting your PhD. So when you get into a PhD program, you graduate with a master's degree. And if you want to, drop out of your program after you're done with your master's degree, you can. That is allowed. So in order to get to your PhD, you have to complete your master's, and it is funded within the PhD program. So the reason why that exists is because, especially with social sciences, when people are coming in, they come from different backgrounds. Some people have no experience, right, of doing research, working in labs, and they need that basic training in research to go, become a candidate, and then, to hold a doctorate. When it comes to people who already have prior experience, obviously, it makes them stronger candidates when they're pitching themselves to supervisors. It makes them much stronger candidates when they're looking for funding, right? Because funding doesn't necessarily come from the university itself. In US, this is important, and I want people to understand this. I always tell people, when you're applying for a PhD program, don't really think of yourself as a student, because you're technically someone who's working for a university, because you're teaching, you're conducting, you're teaching classes. So you are an employee of the university. You're also learning, but you're also an employee. So when people tell you вечный студент, like, no, you're actually working, you're gaining professional experience. That being said, it is also important to understand that you don't really need to have poster presentation experience. You know, you don't need to be published in journals. It's enough to show, I'm talking about social sciences, right? PhD in social sciences. It's enough to show how your background, whether that was your undergraduate experience, if you're applying straight out of undergrad, your internship experience, your volunteer experience, consultancy, maybe odd jobs that you've held, anything that you can connect to your reason for why you're applying to this PhD program, why you would be a great researcher, scholar, how you would contribute to this program and be a great contribution to this particular research project that the professor is working on is going to be great. When it comes to funding, please keep in mind that because you are working for, you are working for an educational institution, please don't apply for PhD programs where you have to pay for it. It is strange. It's like working for someone and paying your employer for working. So only apply to PhD programs that are fully funded, whether it's by the institution itself, and in US, most reputable PhD programs, especially the ones that are research-based, they cover everything. Living expenses, your tuition is waived. Some programs are a little more generous than the others. And then please make sure that you supplement that PhD financial aid package with outside external scholarships, because PhD stipends are not that much. And as an international student, you're only allowed to work 20 hours on campus. You can't really work outside, and that additional funding will always come in handy when you are doing your research, when you're traveling to conferences. That gets really expensive, by the way. Like one ticket is like $700. Staying at a hotel is like what, $150. So make sure that you always have that additional funding, and don't just look into the university, into a single resource. Look at multiple resources. If you're from Kazakhstan, look into Bolshak, look into the funding at the university, look at World Bank funding, if you're applying for master's programs. If you're an undergraduate student, same thing. Don't just rely on one source of funding. So that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, I think you also covered multiple questions that were in the chat. That's very helpful. And another question that I saw in the chat, I think it also applies to Azamat and Adina. So you had your prior experience in like a certain field, like certain research topic. Do you have to follow the same research topic when you apply for PhD programs, or do you just switch the field?
Maybe so. My all experiences, like in Nazarbayev University, in US and in Japan, was like fully focused in one field, especially like in organometallic catalysis field, and it's like kind of one was a big branch of chemistry. So I applied using this to all universities, not only best in catalysis field, also in one of the best in material science, because at that time, like during my senior year, I started to think about, I didn't try another fields, and I started to like talk with people in another fields and look for the experiment application of the like research. So I decided to switch completely to another field, to material science. So that's why I'm here in Penn State. So it's like you should use your research experience to apply, but in PhD, like I think in first session, Eldar Ahmedkaliyev said that you are applying to the school, not to one professor, especially in STEM. So when you will get like to the PhD program, for example, here I'm having now rotation programs. It's a program when you should be in like 3 professors, like labs, like 1 month in each. So you are like introducing like yourself to them, and also knowing about their research, how will be like good fit, like is it good fit between you and your professor or not, and the research and research team also. So I think it's really easy to like change field, but like you should use your experience to have like a good application, I think.
Yeah, I can add something else to Azamat's point. So you don't necessarily to follow the same like research path as you had during the internship. Internship just helps you to gain some skills. So if you can find some connections with the future lab projects, or they use the same kind of, for example, techniques or method. That's cool. So you can show them, oh, you already have this particular set of skills that you can apply for that project the professor working on currently. And that's the most important part, I guess. And as Azamat mentioned, there will be some rotation programs. So don't just think that you have to apply to select the same path. You can try various things, and you will see that your research understanding will broaden, so you can pick, and it's really important to pick the lab not only based on research, but also if you can make the strong connection with your professor. It's really important because you're going to spend 5 years working with that person. So I think it's matching the mentality with your professor is also really important.
Yeah, and the lab mates, you're gonna spend
lab mates, exactly. Yeah, some labs are very toxic, so I think having rotation is really good, so you can see how the environment in a lab and if it suits you. And
I think that's, yeah, it's you are mostly focusing, even if you have any prior research experience or work experience before grad school, just using the skills and showcasing those skills is more important than just focusing on the same field. There was another question in the chat. Do you know about any finding funding opportunities for internships in the grad school, as a graduate student? I think it's a little bit different for the session.
I think you can apply for some fellowship programs which are available. You can check the university website, or sometimes departments send out some fellowship programs which are available to apply for additional funding. But for PhD, I'm not sure about the social science, but for most of the STEM fields, PhDs are funded. So it's either university will pay you, so you need to work as a teaching assistant, for example. That's how they pay the tuition fee and salary for you. Or you're gonna be funded by professors, funding basically. Professor will pay you all the tuition fee and salary for you, so you're gonna work as a research assistant mostly. And that's how the funding system usually works in the States.
Yeah, I think some graduate students find internship in summer just to get some work experience whenever they apply to work, but it's not necessary. You still can get a job even without having internship. It also depends on your professor if they'll let you go to spend 3 months outside of the lab or not. And we've touched a little bit on finding research groups for your internship or even PhD. Do you have a certain criteria, even when you go through the rotations, what are you looking for in the lab? So do you have a certain criteria when you're looking for this research opportunities or spending your graduate time in a lab? Azamat, you're muted.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Good. So when I won the Yessengazin Foundation funding, so now I had a choice where to go. So I had a lot of interviews with professors. So I look at for the main point for me was even I had an interview with professor from MIT. So but I didn't choose MIT, as you see. So I chose the professor from Ohio State because she was really interested in my skills and what she can give me, what she can teach me during this short time internship. I was really interested in that and I thought if someone is interested in you, she will will dedicate her own time to her, to you. For example, I had one-to-one meeting, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times in a week. It was really useful, in terms of explaining hard science and also mental health, how to be in the PhD. So it was a really good time in Ohio State University. And the important case, I got my paper published with this group as a first after. I know if as that case will be the same for other places, but because that professor was interested in me, she invested a lot, and even I finished the project at the time, and she gave me the first after, which is really rare when you have short like time intern people. And also I get like 2 conferences here, and one of them I was like finished the internship, and I went back to Kazakhstan. And then she emailed me, do you want to go to this conference in Indianapolis in US? I'm like, of course I want. And she's like, okay, I can fund your hotel and like food and everything there, but you need to find the funding for travel tickets only. And but I'm like, okay, I like emailed the right university like on the funding for tickets and went there. And as I thought, like funding for tickets and funding for hotel and food was kind of the same. So kind of basically the professor that I even don't know, like just give me like this a lot of opportunities because she was like interested like in me. I think the main point you should look for that if like professor really interested in like his students to invest into him or to provide them with opportunities like papers, conferences, like internships or like connections. I think this is the main point that accelerated my career at least.
I can add. Oh, sorry, Ghalia, I interrupt you.
Yeah, no, like that's very impressive.
Yeah, it is like first starter after like internship. How long was your internship? Like 3 months?
3.5.
3, 4. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. So I think there is always trade-off between choosing the lab, like a large lab with famous PI and the smaller lab with the decent PI. And in case of Azamat, for example, the lab, I guess, wasn't as big, and PI actually had some time to work on with the interns and students more closely. But in case of the famous PIs, for example, big names in the field, they are usually really busy during the summertime. They attend various conferences and talks. And however, if you can get the strong recommendation letter from big names, that will like boost up your application very much. And you can apply, you will have a really good chance to apply top universities in the world. And however, having a small lab with a decent PI help you to track your progress better, so you can meet more often with your advisor, and your PI also can write a really strong recommendation letter. So yeah, there is always trade-off. You should pick whichever works for you best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think like in famous PIs, they also can be like, I agree that they're busy, but my PI was also famous, like one of the famous like person in this field. I think it depends also on people, how they're like making some, I don't know, Google Calendar. Okay, now this time I will dedicate for this student. That's it. I think I know that in most of the like famous guys, you cannot find the time to talk with them, but there are some that you can like that are still interested in their students.
Yeah, I think it applies to both internship and the PhD. Like you either pick some famous professors that has a lot of postdocs and PhD students, or someone smaller, but then they can have like more one-on-one time. Because of more famous professors, they also have some, like they travel a lot, they give a lot of talks and get easier. I have one very interesting question in the chat. So there might be some people that already are in their work experience and they didn't have this as many research opportunities and experiences in undergrad. Well, all they have is work experience. So how would should they shape their application, or like how should they showcase themselves whenever they are applying to grad school? I think Aizhan would know more.
What field are we talking about?
So I think that person is referring to finance.
Okay. So if we're talking about PhD in finance, finance can be both theoretical and a very applied field. So when it comes to, as I said in the very beginning, STEM fields, you do need to have experience, like hard skills when it comes to research. Like you can't Google your way through a PhD program in biomedical engineering, you know, or in chemistry or biology or astrophysics. So when it comes to finance, you have to, again, you know, explain how did your background prepare you or brought you to this idea that you want to do a PhD. Then if you sit down, especially if you have over 10 years of work experience, there was definitely elements of research, because we all do research in our work, whether we're scholars or working educational or research institution. So you look into that. Probably you did financial modeling. Maybe you work with Stata or some other professional software. Maybe you work with large databases. So maybe you attend conferences. Maybe you interact with professors or other academics in the field. Maybe you supplement your professional development with podcasts, books, articles that you read in your free time. Maybe there were some certification programs, that your company paid for, or you went through yourself. So you take in all of that experience, and you take the experience that would be skills, experience, and knowledge that is relevant to a PhD program, and you explain why you would be a good fit. Obviously, when you have absolutely no experience, as in, let's say, you are in the finance field, and then all of a sudden you're applying, let's say, to a degree in psychology, it would be a bit difficult, to explain how you made that jump. But there are people who still make that work. I'm just trying to find the question in the chat.
I think someone else also answered that, like, in some fields, you can still apply for PhD even if you didn't spend time in a lab. Like, it depends on how program itself.
The other thing, so I see it's a question from Nukian. The other thing with Nukian, so I think Azamat mentioned this. So some PhD programs, you apply to the department. They don't actually ask you whether you are matched with a professor, and they discourage that in some cases. But there are certain PhD programs where that personal connection with the PI, the person who's going to be funding your research, is really important. I've seen dozens of cases when people would just like randomly meet a professor at a conference, like whether it's in Astana or somewhere else, and they would start talking about their interests, and then they would keep in touch over email, and the professor would encourage them, nudge them, and be like, you know what, you would be a good fit. Because what you have to understand about PhD admissions is that it's not like a large committee of people like it is in undergraduate programs. It just gets smaller the further you go in your educational journey. So you actually have an opportunity to sit down, look up the person who's going to be reading your application, and talk to them beforehand, so that when they receive your application, they already know that you have applied. They're the ones who encouraged you to apply. And that personal connection does play a huge role in graduate admissions, especially to PhD programs. Because you have to think of it. I often joke that a PhD is a more serious commitment than marriage, given the fact that a lot of people get divorced, after 4 years of marriage. But with PhD, you really have to stick with your supervisor, with your program, if you want to get that nice title to your name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your answer. And I think something also related to this question in the chat. So we talked about looking for some advisors and picking your advisors in PhD opportunities, but also when you're going through application process, or if you're going through your internship process, what skills are you looking for into building yourself to make yourself as a very successful PhD applicant? So when you are having your internship, what skills were you trying to develop, or like what results were you trying to get? In Azamat's case, he was, I think everyone wants to have like a publication that's like a deliverable that you can showcase, but sometimes in 2 months or 3 months, it's not easy to have a paper published. So what else should you look into building in yourself, in your resume and CV?
Presentation also will help. At least you will have some data that you can present on really like small conferences, and in your essay you can like write about that like in more detail. For example, just mentioning your CV that you wrote, like that you went to this conference, and you can write that you worked only 3 months, but you have a data to present in the conference. I think publications, conferences, what else? Recommendation letters is one of the like important like part of your PhD, and also essay. I think your like application package should be like well-rounded, so your like department will accept you.
Mm-hmm. Is there any like soft skills you're looking into that you've showcased?
Like network, and I know writing also kind of skill. I know presentation skills. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of networking, and I think you will learn how to communicate with other scientists during the internship. For example, attending seminars and asking questions also increase your knowledge about the field, and as well as you won't be as afraid to ask questions. So I think that's also a good skill to learn. And you should also be open to share your ideas with your advisor. So you not only follow what he said to you to do, but give him a suggestion how you can broaden or expand the research topic he's working on, and just ask for advices like what and explain your future plans that you want to apply for a PhD, and what kind of advices your PI can give you, basically. And yeah, as Azamat mentioned, try to get as much hands-on experience as possible, try to learn new skills, new methods, and also be curious, like ask questions from your mentors, and ask for suggestions like what kind of papers I should read, and or book or like textbooks, and that will really help you to understand what are you working on and how you're gonna set up that particular experiment, for example, and also will give you a general like background what is field about and where you are going.
Yeah, I think it's very useful. Yeah, Aizhan, can you add
Yes.
something?
So I have more, I guess, life advice because usually when I tell people before they go into a PhD program, especially if they're fresh out of undergrad, I'm like, you don't know what's waiting for you, because PhD in US is one of the most brutal academic programs, because you have to do research, you have to publish. I mean, you don't have to, but it's expected. You have to be teaching, you have to be looking for more funding. So the skills that specifically when it comes to US PhD programs, the first thing is you really have to learn how to advocate for yourself. So if you need funding, if something is missing, if you feel like something has been, sometimes you can even reverse a decision that a committee has put out there if you can justify it. You just have to be, very calm, cool, collected, and provide arguments that will support, whatever it is that you're asking for. So really learn to advocate for yourself, because if you're not advocating for yourself, it's not like people are going to run and help you. The other thing is resilience. PhD is 5 years. When you first start, there's a lot of excitement. You're sharing everything on your Instagram. You launch a course, you become an expert, and then towards your the end of your second, third year, especially as you're going through this process when you're no longer really interacting with people, you're mostly in your lab, and you're only talking to people who have this very niche understanding of your topic. It gets lonely. PhD students develop higher rates of depression. That's why 50% of PhD students in US, they drop out of the program, they don't complete it. And not a lot of people talk about it. The other thing is, for some reason I don't see it on social media, is the financial burden that a PhD program is, because you're, especially as an international student, you're only living on your stipend unless you're supplementing it with scholarships, or you have a partner who's able to support you. And especially if you add in children, if you have children or you're planning to have children, it can get messy pretty fast. So resilience is really important, and reminding yourself, like, why are you doing this? So I always remind people, have your goal written out in front of you every morning, so that you look at it and you don't lose that, not motivation, but a sense of purpose. And journaling also really helps for you, kind of see, like, where did you start and how did you end your PhD programs? Because it's, for me, I always ask people, please, send me the evolution of your objectives through the PhD program. Because towards the end, sometimes people are like, it's just to graduate. They're like, I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. It's just to graduate. The other thing is, develop an elevator pitch for the research that you're doing. Because a lot of times, like even when I attend a conference, And I ask people, okay, what research are you doing? They just start giving this really convoluted response to my question, and I don't really know what is it that they're talking about, even though if we're even in the same field, you know. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to another person now. And that elevator pitch, you know, is an opportunity for you if you're, you know, talking to a professor or someone who can fund you, like in Azamat's case, you know, if they really liked it, so they can connect with you and be like, hey, like I'm going to sponsor your hotel, your food, as long as you're going to cover this. So it's important because people have really short attention spans, especially in the era of TikTok. So you have to make sure that you hook them, that you interest them. So develop that elevator pitch, just like people in the startup community do, for who you are as a scholar and for the research that you're doing. Because a lot of times, you know, research that people are doing is really fascinating, but they just really don't know how to present it in a way that is engaging. The other thing is, please engage in dialogue. Like, don't become a hermit when you go into your PhD program, because a lot of times when you're trying to ideate or you're trying to write or move your research process along, it gets really disheartening when you have no one to discuss it with. And sometimes, you know, just sitting with a friend, you know, grabbing a cup of coffee or tea and just bouncing ideas off of each other or discussing something really helps. It you know, lifts your spirits up, and it also allows you to look at a problem that you've been staring at for weeks, sometimes for months, you know, from a new angle, and you're like, okay, my writer's block is gone. I'm gonna, you know, type out those 2,000 words today, and you feel, you know, super accomplished about it because you're no longer staring at a blank screen. The other thing that, you know, Azamat has mentioned, the essay when you are applying for research, which is, you know, a research proposal, you really have to make sure that it fits the project that you're applying for, the professor, you know, and his research interests, because it's different, you know, from what you write for undergraduate program, and it's more niche and more focused than what you would write to a graduate program, because graduate programs and like master's level degrees, they're very flexible. But with PhD, they're trying to look for people who are not going to be bolting from one idea to another, you know, during their PhD program. So yeah, those would be like more like life, you know, advice that a lot of people don't consider before they go into a PhD program, so that you make sure that you graduate in 5 years, you know, with your mental health, physical health, and your bank account intact.
Yes, I think Aizhan gave very good advice. Even like we can apply it to our experience too. Very useful. So this has been very informative session. I saw also Azamat and Adina were dropping some names of the internships and some links to the funding opportunities. So just copy them. Feel free to follow and explore it. There are a lot of options, a lot of opportunities to pursue a PhD and get you prepared for the PhD journey. We are transitioning to our next session soon, but feel free to stay here a little bit longer if you want to ask any additional questions for our amazing speakers. Again, thank you very much, Azamat, Adina, Aizhan, for squeezing in this 1 hour into your very busy schedule. And thank you for sharing your expertise, your experience with our audience. So hopefully this makes people a little bit more knowledgeable about the whole process and how they can apply and what should they expect. We are recording all of the sessions and we will be working on how to distribute them. So yeah, so it should be an option.
Yes, I also would like to thank all the speakers for their time. They gave this perspective. I remember myself applying for PhD and not knowing much about it, what to expect. To be honest, I didn't know anything about it. What I signed up for, I just booked one-way ticket without knowing anyone in this city besides my future advisor, with whom I communicate only via Zoom. So I think this hopefully gives a perspective of why to do, how to do, and how to be prepared the most. And what Aizhan mentioned was very important, to have your mental health, your bank account in check. It's not only about a research or career, it's about a life in general, right? So with that, I think we'd like to conclude our session and slowly transition to our next session. Thank you very much all for attending, speakers and attendees. See you a little later.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
have a good afternoon.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
I'm ending the meeting for all.